So go ahead, open up your terminal. If it's not favorites already, add it as favorite so you would always see it there. So now we're done with the networking part. We need to go into the machine and carry out some basic setup to make this a very good base image, because this is going to be our base image. So I'm going to do an apt-get update. This is going to fail because I'm not a super user. So in things like this, you have to be the super user to actually do it. So you use that by doing the sudo command, which means super user do. So we're going to run the super user do apt update -y, and just to carry out some basic updates, put in your password, carry out some basic updates to make sure everything is crisp, everything is good. So that's going to happen. So after the updates are done, we're going to carry out some installations. Basically, we'll just install one thing actually. So let's just give this update some time to finish. Let's give it some time to finish. So you can see how the setup is done. First of all, we do the underlying infrastructure, which is the setup of the virtual machine, setup of the hypervisor that will host the virtual machine. Then we set up the network. Now we are in our virtual machine and we are doing some setup within it. So we're going to install the SSH client. So it's sudo apt install, not get SSH. So we're going to install the SSH client. Now, the reason for this is that I do not want to operate with this VM at this level. I want to operate with it from my command line within my system. You're going to see it. That's why I did the setup initially where I was setting up the ports. I told you we're going to go back there. So we're going to also go back there and change it to this IP address that we saw here in the NAT network. So this would allow me to manage this cluster from Visual Studio Code, from my command prompt, or from any prompt that I feel more comfortable in. Right? This makes my life a whole lot easier. Okay. So now we've installed the SSH client, which will allow me to SSH to this particular server. Okay. So with this, we have covered some basic fundamentals in our setup. So we're going to carry out a systemctl status SSH to check out the SSH client to see that it's in a running state. And from what I'm seeing, the SSH client is in a running state, it is active, and it is fine. So this is very, very good news for us. Which means that this server would allow external connections to it or remote connections to it. So the next thing I'm going to do is that we're going to edit our host file. So this host file is going to carry all the configuration that we have for the VMs, for the internal network connection. We're going to put everything that we need for the internet network connection within this host file. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of this place for now because this is a read-only file, as you can see for the error. So I need to be a super user to actually use this effectively. So I'm going to do sudo, I'm going to switch to root. Sudo -I will make me the root user. And with that, I can edit root configuration files, which is what this is. Anything in the etc directory is a root configuration and you cannot edit it without being root. I could have also used sudo vi. So here I'm going to enter the IP address. I'm going to enter the IP address of the network. So we have the 10.10.4. That should be 5. So hold on, let me edit that. So if you can use sudo very well, you can use the nano editor, right? The nano editor is also fine. And I'm going to call this is CP1C1. Okay, CP1C1. So that is sorted. So the next thing I'm going to do is to add the next node, which is our first worker node. So you can have as many workers as you want. Okay, so this is going to be CP1, CN1 for C node 1, C1 for cluster 1. So if you also want to have multiple clusters, it's something you could also do. Okay, CN1, C1. And the next one which will be .7, 10.10.4.7. It's going to be CN2 C1. So we have our nodes ready, and there's one I have to delete here. I have to delete the CP1C1 representing the 127.0.1. I have to take that out. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to leave the local host there. So that's fine. So now I can save this. You can save easily by doing an X, yeah. So that saves it. So with that, let's just do a quick ping test just to just to see it resolve. Okay, a quick ping test. So if you're doing a ping test now and you're not seeing what I'm going to see now, it means that there's an issue. We're not looking for any response here, but once see that when we ping CN1C1, we are getting resolved to 4.6. Okay, so everything looks good, everything looks nice, everything looks okay. So we'll just do a quick check just to look at everything one more time, especially here. Let's look at it. Okay, let's actually change this now to manual. So we need to give it the correct IP address. Now, if for any reason you're not sure of what the IP address is, you can just do a basic cat on the host file, and you can see it there clearly looking at you 10.10.4.5 for CP1 C1. So we're going to take that IP address. That's the IP address we're going to use. So we're going to come over to the second adapter, and we are going to select it, go to wired settings. So from there, go to placing your address 10.10.4.5. The net max should be 255.255.0. Now, next, you should set up the gateway should be .1. All right. So 10.10.4.1. So that's fine. So this looks okay. This looks good. Can leave the DNS and every other thing blank. This is fine. This is all we require for that internal network connection. So click on apply. Now, once this is done, you are basically through with this first part. Okay. So now you can see that the change, it looks as though it didn't apply. That's because whenever you make a change on an adapter, you have to disable and enable that adapter to allow that change to take effect. So I'll quickly do that now. Yeah, so let's disable it and let's enable it. And now we've done that, we can check and you can see that everything is in crisp shape. Everything is in crisp shape. So I'm looking at this VM and everything looks good. The base image looks set. Everything looks okay. So we can now decide to go to the next phase of this, which will be to actually take a snapshot. So Init0 will shut down my VM. So that's another way to shut down. So I'm sure you're picking up some Linux skills along the way, which is also very important. If you're going to be a Kubernetes administrator, you need to understand Linux. So to take the image, we'll go to snapshots and we'll take one. Okay, so you can call this base image. I use the name stable, right? Stable state, which is fine, but you can call it base image. I think base image is a much more better name for this, but that's okay. So we have our stable state. So this is our snapshot. So what this means is this is a very important part of this class, because if you make a mistake, you can always go back to your snapshot. So that is very critical, that when you get to this phase, you take a snapshot. Now, this is something you can do in production. This is something you can do anywhere. So what I'm teaching you is not just knowledge for your lab, but this is knowledge you will use even when you get a job, when you're working in a production setup. You set up this image, everything looks well, everything looks good. the master node is fine, you take a snapshot at that point. So that whatever changes you make after that, if it messes up the work, if it messes up the virtual machine, you can revert back to that stable state. So very critical, very important that you do that. All right, so I will see you in the next one. Thank you and cheers.